Time for another Dirt Daily, and I'm back in the shop. And today, I'm gonna work on my Flatfender. I haven't worked on this Flatfender. I haven't done a video on this Flatfender in about 7 months. And it's kind of been killing me because I really like this thing and I really want to get it running. And there's actually like a trip coming up that a bunch of my friends are going on that I'm probably not gonna attend because I have other stuff to do, but also because this Flatfender is not running and driving. It's running and driving. Well, I'll get to that. But first, this video is presented by Warren Industries. Warren is one of the companies that helps support my channel. Warren has multiple companies in the Warren family. There's Warren that makes hubs and winches, but there's also Factor 55 that makes recovery gear, FabTech that makes suspension, and also Fab Fours, which makes custom bumpers for a lot of different vehicles. And I'm really stoked to have Warren on board, but today we're not actually gonna do anything involved with Warren. This video is just presented by Warren. And today I'm gonna show you what seems to be the problem with this little Jeep because I wanna drive it. All right, let's get to work. So when I drove the Flatfender, when I got it to finally run, I had a major problem. It wasn't major, it ran and drove, but I couldn't disengage the clutch. And most of you understand how a clutch works, but if you don't, I'm gonna try and explain that, and then we're gonna try and dive into this and figure out why the clutch is not disengaging. I'm not gonna do a complete clutch job on this episode. I'm just gonna try and inspect it, and hopefully we can come up with a solution. Maybe we can fix it, and well, maybe not, but we'll find out at the end of this episode. So first of all, what is a clutch, and what does a clutch do? Well, in the past, I've tried to explain things with metaphors. Now, if you don't know what a metaphor is when you kind of teach a story or compare something to something else that you think would be more relatable. So a clutch is basically a spring and a friction plate and a big heavy chunk of metal, and they all live together, and then they can disconnect and reconnect, and that's maybe hard to grasp. So I'm gonna show you with this. This is a cheese sandwich. And this represents the 3 major components of a clutch. So let's think about, there's bread, and then there's cheese, and then there's more bread. And the thing about this other piece of bread, it needs a hole in the middle of it. All right, so this second piece of bread has a hole in the middle of it. So, what does all this do? What does this have to do with a clutch? I'm gonna explain this as this cheese sandwich metaphor, and I'll probably spin out of control and it won't make a whole lot of sense, and then I'll actually show you the parts of the clutch and maybe it'll make more sense, but just stick with me. So this cheese sandwich represents the 3 major parts of your clutch. And there's other parts, but these are the 3 major parts. You have the part that's connected to the engine. That's known as your flywheel, and it's basically a big, heavy chunk of metal. And then you have your clutch disc, and that's what this piece of cheese is in the middle. And then you have your pressure plate, and that goes between the clutch disc and your transmission, and that actually has a hole in the middle. So this is what you have sandwiched onto the back of your engine. And most of the time, these are all held together, like they're all clamped together, because the pressure plate is actually bolted to the flywheel, and when it's bolted to that, it's squeezing the clutch disc in between all of that. So it's like squeezing it all together. The pressure plate has these springs. It's basically compressing the clutch disc against the flywheel and keeping it all locked together. Now the hole in the middle of the pressure plate, that's where a shaft that is the input shaft of your transmission splines into your clutch disc. So basically think about it like this. Flywheel and pressure plate attached to engine, clutch disc, cheese, is attached to transmission. And when they're all clamped together, the engine turns and the transmission turns. And then when you push in the pedal, the clutch disc disengages. The little springs that hold it all clamped together, those are released, and then the middle cheese inside the sandwich can spin freely from the engine, or the engine can spin the flywheel freely from the transmission. So basically this is like a connection in between a spinning engine and a transmission that you want to engage and disengage so you can shift gears. Is that too complicated? Then let me show you the real parts. Get this cheese sandwich out of here. I think it'd be way better with some ham. Oh, ta-da! This is what we're actually talking about. This part is your pressure plate. This part is your clutch disc. And this is the flywheel. The flywheel is a big, heavy chunk of metal, and this bolts onto the back of the engine block. And if you see these teeth on the side here, those are the teeth that the starter engaged to crank the engine over. So you have your flywheel. These holes down here in the middle, those are where it bolts to the crank of your engine so that this spins as your engine spins. Oh, and then deep down inside there, there's a pilot bushing. You can see that kind of bronze piece right there in the middle. And that is what the very tip of the transmission shaft slides into that. Now, the transmission shaft, the part that turns the transmission, is splined. And those splines slide into this, which is the center of your clutch disc. So as this turns, your transmission turns. And this usually has two sides. There's one side that says flywheel side. So that goes up against the flywheel. And then there's these springs, and there's all this friction material around the outside. And if you ever heard of somebody that smoked the clutch, it usually means they damaged all of this friction material. They either ground it too much, or it spun and it like burned it all, or it glazed it. And basically you want this stuff to like have friction and connect between the flywheel and the pressure plate. So you see this nice smooth surface here? Well, that is going to press up against one side of the clutch disc, and then the other side is going to press up against the flywheel, and then these holes around the edges are where this pressure plate actually bolts to the flywheel. So if I set that on there right now, if I just lay this on here, there's about a 1/4 inch gap between the pressure plate and the flywheel. But when I put the bolts in and I tighten that down, that will seal up, and it applies pressure in between the pressure plate and the clutch disc and clamps it to the flywheel. And then it doesn't want to move around. Everything will move in one unit. But when you push in the clutch pedal, it actually presses down on these 3 thumbs right here, which you can't even really release it by hand, but it'll press down on that, and that will release the pressure from the pressure plate onto the clutch disc, and it will allow the clutch disc to spin freely between the pressure plate and the flywheel. And that is when you shift gears. So you press in the pedal, these arms get pushed down, it releases the pressure between the pressure plate and the clutch disc, and then the clutch disc can spin freely. On the Flatfender, right now, what is happening is the clutch is not disengaging. When I press on the pedal, I'm assuming it's pushing these arms down, but it's not disengaging the clutch disc from the clutch pressure plate or the flywheel. What is the problem? Well, all of this stuff is pretty tight, but it should disengage enough so that the engine will be able to disengage from the transmission. What happens right now is if I put the transmission into gear and I crank the engine over with the clutch depressed, like if the clutch pedal down, which should be disengaged, it'll start in gear and it'll start driving. Like it won't hold back. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of break that loose, but we're going to start by trying to inspect it, because there's actually a way that you can inspect the clutch in the Flatfender. Oh my. This, I was gonna show you in the Jeep, but then I was like, I have this right here. This is a transmission and transfer case that would go in a Flatfender. T90, Spicer 18, and this is the bell housing. And this is the input shaft on the transmission. So this is the part that the clutch disc splines onto. Or it should. There it goes. So why do I have this sitting on the bench getting covered in dust and cobwebs? Well, I had this rebuilt years ago to go into another Jeep, and that other Jeep project stalled and it's been sitting, and it really should just go right in here because it's all been rebuilt and all the seals are probably good. Well, they were good. I'm hoping that I can just get this one running as it is, though this one needs rebuilt. This one leaks like a sieve. But what I want to show you is this is the bell housing. This is what goes between the transmission and the engine. Most of you know this stuff. I'm just kind of making it as simple as possible for the people that have never seen the insides of a Jeep transmission from the 1940s. It's pretty simple. This is a 3-speed transmission. These are the shifters for the transfer case. And it has reverse, first, second, third. Basic, simple stuff. All right, so the bell housing is what the clutch is all inside of. And if you look at the input shaft right down here, this little part that doesn't have any spline on, that's the part that goes into, oh boy, let me try not to drop it on the floor. That's the part that goes into the center, the pilot bushing. Some flywheels have a bearing, a pilot bearing. This one has a pilot bushing. So this would slide over the transmission input shaft. And you basically want that pilot bushing to help keep the input shaft lined up with the clutch and everything. So all of those parts live inside of this, and this bolts up to the back of your engine block. Now, you'll notice on the bottom of this bell housing in particular, there's like a big old hole. There's like 2 holes. There's a big hole and a little hole. Those would not normally be there. Somebody took a hole saw to this for some reason, probably because the clutch either wasn't disengaging or there was a bunch of junk inside there, or they were trying to inspect it. Now, the thing that's kind of dumb is that right up here on top, there's an actual access plate that you can remove and inspect the clutch. It's right here. So what I want to do on the green Flatty is see if I can get to that access panel and inspect what's going on with the clutch inside there. Because this clutch disc should be able to slide just a little bit on that input shaft of the transmission. And if it's like locked in place and not disengaging, or if it's rusted to the flywheel, it won't allow it to disengage and then spin separately from the engine. And I'm hoping that I can get in there through this access panel and maybe like hit it with a hammer a little, or pry it a little, or just kind of see what's going on and try and break it loose. So what I want to do is I want to get into that cover that's on top of the transmission and see if I can get access to that inspection plate on the bell housing, and then see if I can see inside and figure something out. I'm not sure if it's all going to line up, and I'm also not sure if these bolts are going to break loose, but that's the next challenge. So I need to get this access panel off of the top of the transmission. Now this transmission's got some weird stuff going on. There's like a weird hinge that is bolted to the dash, and there's like this piece of metal that's kind of hooked to the shifter. I'm assuming all of this stuff was because the transmission popped out of gear maybe, and someone was just trying to come up with some farmer fix in order to keep it together. So I'm going to remove all of that. Then I have to remove the screws that go to the boot ring. This is what would have held the boot around the shifters for the transfer case, because that boot ring actually comes up over top of the center panel that I need to remove. And then there's also a footrest that's down here by the throttle, and I'm assuming that has a threaded rod on the back or something. I don't 100% remember if there's like a notch cut out for that or if that goes through and also holds it down. So basically I need to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bolts and that footrest and this boot ring around the shifters to try and get everything to come off. And then hopefully I can access the panel on the top of the bell housing. I really hope these bolts don't all just start snapping off. You know what? Before I do that, I'm going to crawl underneath this thing and see if it's possible to see any of these bolts where they come through and see if it's possible to spray any of them and maybe start like a little bit of lubrication to start breaking them loose. I'm just worried they're all going to snap off and then I'll be dealing with that problem, which is probably still going to happen, but let's just inspect it and see what we can find. If you look under here, you can just make out the bottom nuts that are captured as part of the tub and the bolts poking through. There's one, and you might be able to see the other one there. I think there you can probably see the other two. I'm hoping I can get some spray on those and let them soak. I may even have to come back tomorrow after they've soaked overnight and see if I can get them to break loose. I really don't want to have them break off in those captured nuts, but it really wouldn't surprise me if that's what we end up having. I sprayed a bunch of these underneath. Now I'm spraying them on the top, hoping it all kind of leaks down through. What am I spraying with? The acetone and ATF. Seems to be everybody's favorite recipe to break down old bolts and rust and try to get stuff to loosen up. So I don't know if I'm getting the threads of every single one, but I think this is a good starting point. And then I may even come in tomorrow after I let it soak overnight and see if I put a little bit of heat to it. I want to be careful that I don't set the ATF on fire, but I think it's a good idea to let them soak and kind of be super gentle and try to get these things to loosen up and not just snap off. I got impatient. I don't want to wait till tomorrow. I want to see if any of these will break loose. Come on. Ooh. That's a good sign. That acetone ATF is the way to go. How about this one? Oh yeah. Man, now they're coming out nice and smooth. I gotta be careful what I say. I'll jinx myself. Oh yes. Nice and easy. All right, 3 out. How about this one right here? Come on, play nice. Come on, nice and gentle. There we go. So you've got this bolt right here. You got this little tiny bolt, and it goes through the floor, and then it goes into this captured nut. And say the captured nut comes to about 1/4 inch of the end. Well, then you have this end section that gets all rusty and crusty and full of junk. And as you're backing it out, sometimes all the threads are fine until that bottom section until that bottom section gets into the captured nut, and then that is what cross threads and then snaps. So you gotta be really gentle. And sometimes you'll wanna even like back it out, back it in, kind of wiggle it and kind of work it way out. So we're getting lucky. We have 4 of them out so far. I'm gonna play nice. I spoke too soon. Snapped it right off. That's a bummer. Got it. Let's see if this guy will back off. Oh yeah, look at that. I think it's probably almost hand tight. Boom. Yeah, so that little thing has like a threaded rod and a adjuster nut on it. Everything is off. Everything is off on this, but this panel sticks up over it on this side, so I need to get these last 2 screws out. That's a little worrisome. Oh, come on, boys. Let's just be friendly. I feel like I need a sharper screwdriver. The screwdriver in here, and I'm going to whack it with this hammer. And then see if that. Oh, come on. Oh, look at that one. Yeah. Come on. Come on. There we go. There we go. All right, I got this off. And right there is our inspection cover. So we got to get that off, and then we can hopefully see what's going on inside the bell housing. I got one bolt out, but the other bolt is hidden back behind here. But I'm hoping I can just loosen it and then pivot this up and around and not actually have to back this bolt all the way out. Look at that. Very dirty and crusty. Looks like it's got a bunch of who knows what is that? Friction material or mouse nest, rat's nest. Let's look down in here and see what we're dealing with. So there's a lot of like random material, which might be friction material off of the clutch disc, but it might also just be rat's nest and other junk that's gotten pushed down in there. Right here in front, that kind of curved piece, that is the clutch throwout bearing. So if I push in the clutch pedal, does that move? It does. So that's a good sign. Now there is a cable down below that you can adjust, but I believe it's already been adjusted as far as it'll go and still doesn't disengage the clutch. So I have a couple things I can do. I don't want to spray this with any sort of like WD-40 or other penetrating oil, because I don't want to get the clutch disc all oily, otherwise it won't have the friction that it needs to work. But I think what I'm going to do to start is just stick the air hose down in there, see what type of garbage blows out, And then I may actually start the engine and see what spins around and what comes loose and comes flying out this hole. Now, if you look down inside there, down deep inside there, you can just make out the splines of the transmission input shaft, and that's what the clutch disc should ride on. And the clutch disc needs to be able to slide back and forth on that just a little bit. So that's what we need to kind of determine, is if that clutch disc is like seized or locked onto the flywheel, or if there's any way to kind of break that loose. All right, transmission is in neutral. When I push in the clutch, I can see it activating the throwout bearing. So I'm gonna hold the clutch in, but still have this in neutral and start up the engine and see what spins down inside there. It shouldn't go anywhere. All right, everything's spinning nice. Pressure plate's spinning, throwout bearing is engaging and disengaging. I wonder if we get like a long screwdriver or punch and we get down to those splines where the clutch disc rides on the transmission input shaft, and give it a few whacks and see if it kind of loosens stuff up in there. So I took a hammer and a punch and I reached down in there and I just kind of tapped this section of the clutch disc, trying to kind of rattle it loose. But this is probably about 1.25 inches long. And so if that is rusted solid to the transmission input shaft and it doesn't want to move, and then the face that goes up against the flywheel is rusted solid, maybe this friction material is rotted away, or maybe the rivets have rusted, who knows, because this Jeep could have been sitting outside in the rain getting water down in there. There's any number of reasons why that could be locked to the flywheel. So there's a couple different ways you can try and break this loose. You can drive it and just constantly hammer on the clutch pedal and try to get it to break loose when it's under load. I've seen people drive it up to like a tree and put it in gear and like have it try to spin and like break the clutch loose. Like you have the pedal down, but the vehicle is driving into the tree and you're basically forcing the engine to try and push the vehicle when the vehicle can't move. Or you could like say hook it up to a chain or something to have it try and pull away from the tree, and you're basically shock loading the entire drivetrain trying to get the clutch disc to break loose from the flywheel. All of those are doable, but they're also kind of abusive. So it's kind of, what do you want to do? What's the thing that what's the next step that you're gonna take to try and get this clutch disc to break loose? I kind of want to just get down in there as close as I can and squirt some of that ATF acetone mixture, see if I can get it right on the splines, maybe use a straw or a funnel to try and get it right on the splines and not all over everything, and see if it seeps inside those splines and sort of starts working everything loose, and give it an opportunity to kind of break loose before I go to the next step where I chain it to something that's immobile and see if it will shock load the clutch disc apart from the flywheel. So I'm gonna find a little tiny hose or funnel, and I'm gonna feed it down in there and try to get some right on the splines, not all over the whole disc. You gotta be careful because it's gonna spin and then it's gonna throw it all out, and then it's gonna soak into the clutch abrasive material, which, I mean, let's be honest, this thing probably needs to have the transmission dropped and a new clutch installed. I'm just trying to figure out a way to break this loose without going to the next step of actually ripping this all apart and doing the right thing, which is swapping in that clutch and flywheel and probably the whole transmission and transfer case that I have sitting on the bench over there. So I grabbed this piece of hose and I fill it up with that mixture of acetone and ATF, and then I kind of reach it down in there and let it all drain onto the splines of the transmission input shaft. And I'm hoping that it will kind of seep into the inside splines of the clutch disc and start working that loose and let that thing kind of start breaking loose and move back and forth on the transmission input shaft when I push in the clutch, and that should hopefully disengage the clutch disc from the flywheel. I don't want to put too much on there, but I also need to make sure that it gets inside there and it breaks stuff loose. All right, let that stuff soak in. I'm going to put it in first gear, push in the clutch, and see if it starts, and if it starts in gear or if it starts moving. It'll probably start moving, at which point I'll shut it off so I don't drive through the wall. Man. Oh, here's an idea. I put it in third gear and I try to start it in third gear and it's in high range. Yeah, if I try to start it in third gear high range, that's going to be the engine working the hardest to get it to move. So let's see what that does. I just got to be careful it doesn't jump into gear and race off across the shop. It really does. Ooh. Look at that. Our fuel filter is not getting fuel. What the heck's going on here? I put this new fuel pump on after the last new fuel pump I put on. This one's got like a lever arm on the bottom that you can pump the fuel with, but it doesn't seem to be pumping the fuel. What in tarnation's the problem? I really wanted to work on the Flatfender. The thing's been starting and running every time, and now it won't start and run when I actually want to take it out and hammer around on it and see if I can get it to break loose. Urgh. So the last time I had this Jeep out running, when I brought it back to the shop, it stopped running and the fuel pump stopped pumping. And so I got online and everybody's like, oh, that fuel pump you got's junk. You need to get this one. And so I ordered it and it's great. It has like an arm at the bottom that you can prime with. And it has a bowl up here that you can remove and clean out. But for some reason, it's not pumping fuel out. Like it has fuel in it now, you can see it. And if I push this up and down, what? And now it is. Maybe the Jeep doesn't want to be worked on right now. Maybe the Jeep wants to be in timeout. So I guess the next question is does this arm back here? Yeah. So that's working too. So everything's fine. I don't know what's wrong. It was not working when it was on the side of the engine. I was pumping this, it was cranking over, it was not pumping fuel out this. And I was like, well, there's obviously something not happy. And so I pulled it all out and now everything's happy. I'm not happy. Everything's bad. I'm mad. All right, I'm gonna dump the fuel out so I'm not spilling it on myself, and then I'm gonna bolt it back in, and then it's gonna start and run great. Or it's gonna get pushed in the corner for timeout. Cars are a fun hobby. You know, when kids get into reading books and playing video games, people are like, why are they not doing more stuff with cars? Because cars can be so frustrating. I mean, you love them, but man, it can make you so mad. Where'd my flashlight go? Again. I'm going to crank it over and see if gas comes out of this brass terminal right here, which will then hook up to this hose right here. Actually, I can just hook it up and see if the fuel comes into the fuel filter the way it's supposed to. Just set that right there. Oh, look, I'm bleeding. Neat. Here goes. Hey, it's working. All right, it's gonna start now. This stuff's fun because the fuel pump stops working. Okay, why? I don't know. Take it apart. Take it apart, pump it by hand, works just fine. Put it back together. Now it's pumping fuel. So what was wrong? No idea. What did we fix? No idea. What if it happens again? It'll probably happen again. Why? I don't know. But maybe it won't. You're right. Might not happen again. Might happen again. Might not happen again. No idea. No idea what's wrong. No idea what we fixed. All I know is I want to drive it. I want to get the hood closed, the thing running, and drive it out the door. And then I can rip around in it and see if I can break the clutch loose. Because now I sprayed the clutch down with acetone ATF, which you're never supposed to do, but I did it anyways. Still in neutral. Runs great. Runs great. Why does it run great? I don't know. I love this little Jeep, and I'm about ready to push it back in the corner. All right, close the hood. Don't forget to latch your hood. I'm gonna shut it off, put it in gear, start it up, and drive out of here. And then I'm gonna bounce around and see if it breaks the clutch loose. Remember, I don't have any brakes, and the only way to stop is to have it in gear with the clutch out, clutch pedal out, so the clutch engaged, and then shut the engine off. So I'm just basically driving around with the clutch pedal depressed, hoping that it will break loose. Now I'm going to shift into third, hopefully third. Maybe that's second. I think I'm going to kill the battery. That's the next problem. All right, third gear. Let's try to start this thing in third gear and see if it will break the clutch loose. Nope. Ow. Now it doesn't want to start at all. There, we just started second gear, but we're in low range. Oh, now it doesn't want to run again. Back into neutral. Kind of sounds like our fuel pump went out again. I think that's it for this Dirt Daily. Our clutch is not broken loose. Our engine doesn't want to run. I've had a lot of fun working on this Jeep. I love this Flatfender. But I really need to get back to some of my other projects. I think we learned something. We learned how to get down to the clutch access panel. We didn't break all the bolts loose. We only broke one of them loose. I mean, broke one of the bolts. We broke them all loose. We only broke one off. I don't know why my fuel pump is acting up, because it's another brand new fuel pump. Watch, it's going to start and run like a sewing machine. I don't know, it isn't. All right. Time to look back under the hood. Get yourself a little Jeep. They're a lot of fun. it'll keep you off the streets and out of trouble, because you'll be in the shop all the time trying to figure out why it's running or not running. I really wish I was hanging out with my friends in Idaho and Colorado that were driving Flatfenders, but as you can see, I'm not ready to go. We'll see you guys next time. I think I figured out the problem. I was using the wrong metaphor. My clutch in my Flatfender is not a cheese sandwich, it's a grilled cheese sandwich, and it's all stuck together, and it won't come apart. See you guys next time.